Good morning, everybody. We're going to start our Genoise sponge. I just want to apologize if you hear any noise in the background. It's just my son playing. But let's get all on our way. Okay, we're going to get started with our ingredients and what we're going to be using. You notice I'm going to use a lemon in mine just to give it a lemony flavor. But we're going to start with 125 grams of plain flour, 125 grams of granulated sugar. You can use caster sugar, baking sugar, whatever you like. You can use 4 large eggs. That's large in the US or Canada, medium in the UK. There's my lemon. And then 50 grams of butter. Okay, so we're going to get started on the eggs. And I foolishly started to separate my eggs and then realized what kind of sponge that I was doing, and there's absolutely no reason to do that. But I figured I would leave it in the video since I did it, just in case you needed to know how to separate eggs. So we have different bowls because you want to, first you want to make sure you take off your jewelry and set that aside. But then the reason I have different bowls is because I want to crack it in one and then dump it. You don't want to use one bowl for it all, just in case you do get some egg yolk in there, because if it was a recipe that needed a pure egg white because you were going to make a meringue out of them, you don't want any bits. So I just pop it right into my hand and, jiggle it around. This is one way. You can put it into the shell, which kind of cuts the white off of it, and then put the yolk into another container. And then I'm going to take my eggshell and put it aside. I just brought another bowl just to have. And then I'm going to pour my egg whites into the main bowl that I would have been using if this was actually necessary. Then I'll go to my next egg, crack it, and you'll see I was having trouble with these eggs because they were so thin that I didn't want to break the yolks. So you see this is a different way. I put it into the bowl and then you just go in and scoop up the yolk. You're very gentle with your hands and let it flow through. Yes, it's messy on your hands, but it makes it so easy. And then you don't have to use an egg separator, which sometimes they can cut the egg and all that. And then again, you take that, dump it into the main before you go to the next one. It's just good practice to do. Okay, I'm going to speed up my egg yolk separating because, as I said, absolutely no reason to do this. But also to say that right now I'm also preheating my oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 Celsius, so it gets nice and hot. And also bringing a saucepan of water to kind of a roaring simmer on my stove top. I'm gonna clean up here and get set up with the rest of my items. Okay, so you see that I have my pan here, as I'm also going to combine my eggs, as I should have done from the get-go. But as far as pans, you can use whatever you want. You can use 2 regular cake pans. I think they're about 9 inches usually. You can use a bundt pan. You can use a tube pan. I'm using these large cake pans because I decided I wanted to fill them. Genoise sponge is a great base for entremets or a lot of different things because there's a lot of structure to it. Even making cakes that you have to put fondant on top of, Genoise sponge are very good for because they're light, but they actually have a structure to them and very kind of solid, we'll say. They're also easy to be carved, which is also quite nice. So I am greasing my pan with some butter. I don't use lining paste for this only because I don't like the extra flour. And because there's butter in this recipe and it is so light, you really only need to grease it. You don't need to flour it also, that I've found. They come right out. If you want, you can also make cupcakes out of it and use liners if you so choose. Kind of the opportunities are endless. So I'm going to nice and grease up my pan. And I'm going to speed this right along. just make sure to get it nice and in all of the crevices, and you can wipe any extra butter out. I end up doing that at the end, but I'm not sure if you quite see it, so that it's not all lumpy inside. Okay, we are done with our pan. I'm going to set that aside and get to mixing our ingredients. We're going to take our 4 eggs and put it onto our scale, and make sure to hit it to 0 so you can easily, without having to do math problems, see how much you're putting in the bowl. We're going to put 125 grams of granulated sugar into the bowl. You can use caster sugar, you can use a large grained sugar crystal like I am here. It really doesn't matter. Just don't use icing sugar, because you do want the sharp edges of the sugar to help aerate those eggs. You're going to see here that I'm going to take a little bit out just because I'm a little particular. Will the 2 extra grams matter? Not in the least. I just want it to be precise. As I said before, I'm going to make this a lemon and then pair it with blueberry later on. So I'm going to zest a lemon. You can do whatever flavors you want. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to zest this lemon. You just do it however you are comfortable. You can either hold it down and rub the fruit onto the zester, so you can bang it down, or you can flip the zester around and use it to rub over the fruit. A lot of people do this way. I actually find that uncomfortable to do, so I like to manipulate the fruit instead. You can use zest of any fruit, or you can use flavored extracts. It really doesn't matter what you put in it. You could put alcohol bases into it to flavor it, kind of whatever you want to do. It's kind of very forgiving. The only thing you don't want to do when we get to the egg stage is knock the air out of the eggs when you're mixing it in. But that's it for as far as rules. I'm going to finish up zesting, and then I'm going to take my lemon and roll it around to loosen up the juice for later when I decorate. I'm then going to move over to the stove top where I have my simmering water going for my bain-marie. I'm going to turn off the simmering water, and then I'm going to take my mixing bowl and put it over top. I'm then going to use an electric whisk because it makes short work of it. You can use a hand mixer if you want, or good old-fashioned elbow grease, but you need to whip really, really fast when you're using the whisk, if you're using a manual whisk. So this makes short work of it. So I put this over the now hot water. It's no longer simmering, and I check the temperature. I'm looking for 40 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit before I stop. It's reached the temperature that I want, so I'm going to take it off the water and set the pan of water aside and check my batter. But then you see it's gotten nice and fluffy in there, and then I'm going to go and take it over, and I'm going to continue to whip it to cool it down, and it's going to thicken and puff up even more. So you see my thermometer, I'm trying to get it now back down to room temperature. I had gotten it down at this point to like 96 degrees or something like that, but I'm trying to go for someplace in the lower 70s. So you just keep on mixing. Some people keep it over the bowl for a certain time. I think Paul Hollywood and other people say 7 minutes. Some people say 14 minutes. It's all different things that you'll find. However, it's all about getting it to that ribbon stage of heating it and then cooling it. So I keep mixing, as you see, and then I go and I put my thermometer in and I keep checking it. So it takes several minutes to do, but eventually you'll get there. So just have some patience. Okay, I'm just about at the end of the whisking process, and then I'm going to lift it up and see that nice batter kind of ribbon off. I suggest you look up ribbon stage of batter just in case you need some other tutorials on what stage to get to. And then I check my batter to make sure what temperature it is that it came down to room temperature. Now I'm going to take my melted butter and I'm going to take the lemon zest that I made before and I'm going to pour it into my butter. Again, this is the way I do it. There's other ways to do it. You could have put the lemon zest in with the flour if you wanted to. I don't find it makes a difference, but if you're having trouble with it combining and you're finding some inconsistencies in your cake, try doing it the other way and keeping it as a dry ingredient. I'm going to stir that zest into the butter as much as I can, and then I'm going to pour it into my egg batter. You're going to notice when I pour it that I pour it on the outside ring of the batter. I don't pour it straight on top because I don't want to deflate all of that air that I just put into the egg. Okay, now that I got all the butter in, I'm going to take my whisk and I'm going to do some nice slow figure eight movements and also some folding movements to pick that butter up and move it through the batter. I personally don't go and incorporate it fully where other people will do that and make sure that it is nice and fully incorporated. But I want to touch that batter as least as possible, and I still have to add the flour. And the butter is going to get incorporated once you pull the flour in as well. So I rather err on the side of touching the egg mixture less as not to get air out of it. So I'm going to weigh out 125 grams of flour into a bowl. You could have done this earlier too. I just had forgotten to. The reason I'm going to weigh it into a separate bowl is because I am going to put it through a sieve and sift it into the mixture. This isn't really about clumps because the flour that I'm using is pre-sifted and there's really no clumps in it. The reason I'm doing it is so it has a lighter fall on top of the whipped eggs instead of dumping in this heavy flour on top of it. Okay, now I'm going to fold gently my flour into my egg mixture. You may notice in the video that I'm going to start picking up some of the clumps of butter with the lemon zest in it, and that's okay because now you're just going to get it nice and smooth, but doing it gently so you don't knock out all the air. Most people that have problems with Genoise Sponge is because they overmixed it and took all the air out, or they overbeat when the flour is in it and build up too much gluten. Okay, now with the batter nice and smooth and still fluffy, I'm going to pour it into my pan. Because I'm doing individual portions, I have it on top of my scale, and I'm going to put an equal amount into each cup. So we are finishing up putting our batter into the tin, and I'm going to then put it into a 375-degree oven for 12 to 13 minutes. I made the mistake of using my smaller oven, which I wasn't thinking when I did it. I was just sidetracked, so I got a very uneven bake. The smaller oven, putting it in long-wise, is just never a good idea for something that you want baked evenly. So and then I had left it in for 15 minutes because I got sidetracked with my child. So mine overbaked a bit. The ones to the front of the oven, which you're going to see in a second, came out beautifully and they were great. The ones to the back of the oven, which is one of the ones I split open, did dry out a bit. They still tasted yummy. So here, these are nice and golden. They're springy and spongy, and the backs are a little bit darker. These dried out a little bit. But they came out great and they tasted great. You'll notice that there are some white spots. That's just because of some flour that didn't get incorporated. They didn't notice. I then went and I had some blueberries, so I ended up making a blueberry jam, a quick one on the stove, with a little bit of sugar, not too much, and a pinch of salt, which nicely balanced it out. I hollowed out the cakes, and then I put the blueberry jam in, and then covered them up with the little piece, which I shaved off a little bit off the end to make up the depth. And then I decorated them with some lemon-flavored icing sugar, and then I sugared some blueberries. And it came out to be a really nice, refreshing dessert with a nice light cake that is on the drier side, but it holds its structure that way. And then when you put in the jam or the icings or whatever else, it pairs just really nicely. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson on the Genoise sponge. And just maybe in the comments you can put what type of flavors that you will do and how you decorate your cakes when you do them. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.